Welcome back to the shop. This is part 2 of understanding the electrical components, sensors, and the ECU and CDI. If you haven't already caught part 1, there'll be a link down in the description to part 1 that will get you up to speed where we're at right now. In part 1, we pretty much covered the evolution of the modern day motocross bike as far as the electrical components are concerned and how we got to where we're at today with the current mass density fuel injection system, electric start, and all that. So in this part 2, we're going to be walking through diagnosing the electrical components on these bikes, pulling up trouble codes, how to diagnose trouble codes, and the tools that you'll need to do this. Now keep in mind, this is kind of a crash course and every bike will be a little bit different, but the goal here is to give you the tools that you need to be able to step into this with some type of idea of what's going on and how to get through it. Some of the tools that I use to diagnose electrical problems, obviously you're going to need a multimeter of some type. I use these alligator clips all the time when I have to just jump wires. Like let's say I'm troubleshooting a fuel pump and I want to connect the fuel pump to a battery and see if it works or not. That's what these are good for. It's good to have a battery if your bike is not a electric start bike. It will not have its own battery, so you will want a battery for that. Test lights can be convenient sometimes, and safety wire. Oh, and lastly, a battery charger. If you have a no start issue and you're cranking the bike, pretty much after about 6 or 7 cranks, the lithium battery is going to start giving up. So again, it's good to have a battery charger. Safety wire is real convenient for, let's say this is plugged into a sensor, this terminal right here, and I'm wondering, you know, what the reading is. What like let's say this is a throttle position sensor and I want to tap into it to see what's going on. I can use the safety wire here and go up into the rubber boot. If I can get it in there. You gotta work at it a little bit. There we go. I can go up in behind the wire there, in between the insulation and the wire, and get a reading of what's going through that wire with my voltmeter by tapping onto the safety wire here. Another thing that helps is having some multimeter probes that are very thin and pointy. I picked these up on eBay right here. I have a whole bunch of these. See this? But these are nice too because these even have the ability to get right up in there. So you tap. Not only that, but when you're testing like this is the O2 sensor right here, but when you're testing a sensor or whatever, because they're thin like this, they're real easy to get right up in here in these female connections and tap into them to get a reading. Now, if you have the standard probes that come with most of your multimeters that are kind of fat, they're about as fat as this right here, and you just can't get it up in there to get a connection, now again, that's where the safety wire comes in. You can just put safety wire up in there, put 2 pieces in there and tap into it like that with your multimeter. Okay, let's talk a little bit about pulling your trouble code. A lot of your modern day motocross bikes have what you call an MIL light. MIL stands for malfunction indicator light, or check engine light as most of us call it. On these Yamahas and the Hondas, it's going to be pretty much up on your handlebars. And on your KTM variant bikes or Huskies, gas. Beavis! Hold on. Leave me alone, Beavis. I'm making a video. Alright, your gas Husqvarna's KTMs are going to have a FI light, which that's pretty much your MIL light right there. I believe the FI stands for fuel injection, but that's basically your check engine light. It's hidden behind the front number plate. And your newer Suzukis and Kawasaki's will also have an MIL light too on the handlebars. Every fuel injection bike has trouble codes that you can pull one way or another. How you get them from each bike will all be a little bit different, but if it's a fuel injection motocross bike, you can pull trouble codes if you have an issue, even if it doesn't have a light. If you have your service manual, you can just read it, how to access your trouble codes. It'll tell you how for that particular model. A lot of times in most of the bikes, if the bike is capable of running, it will flash a trouble code while the bike's running. Or if it's like, let's pretend this is a 2020 Kawasaki KX450. It has the MIL light, check engine light, and it has a battery. I hit the start button, it cranks over, but it's not starting. Well, I can look up at the MLO light and it might be blinking. And if it's blinking, it's going to be blinking codes for you. And then you can look up the code and figure out, it'll give you a clue what's going on. I'll use this chart right here to kind of show you how to read the code. So like a code 11 is going to be the light's going to turn on for a long time, then shut off, then turn on and off real fast. And that would be code 11. So the long time indicates 10 and the short indicates a 1, which would be 11. Or if you have a long and then 2 shorts, that would be a 12. Or a long and 3 shorts, that would be a 13. Or if you have, let's go right here, 2 longs and then 1 short blink, that would be a 21. Now keep in mind, it repeats this over and over again, right? So if we have a code 21, it's going to flash like this. It's going to go on, off, on, off, on, off. Then it's going to pause for a second with no light activity. Then it's going to do it again. On, off, on, off, on, off. And it's just going to keep repeating that. If it has multiple codes, it'll go to the second code, the third code, and then the fourth code, and then start all over at the first trouble code. That's how they do it, and they'll just keep cycling through it. Usually you only have 1 code, but if you have multiple codes, it will display all the codes one at a time and then start over. But that's how you would read the codes if you're using the check engine light to get the code. And of course, then you'd run to your manual. This ain't a manual, but just to give you an idea, like let's say this code 11 here, we're getting the code 11, well that would indicate a throttle position sensor. Or if it was a code 25, we go over here, gear position sensor. Then on other model bikes like these newer Yamahas with the electric start, you're going to access your codes with your Yamaha app. So let me go to the app here. All right, you're going to use the app. You're going to use your phone, and you're going to connect to the Wi-Fi of the box now, or the bike. Now, if you have never done that before on your bike, you just have to remove this cover right here. It's a little box that has a serial number on it, and that's going to be a passcode, and then you follow the directions in the Yamaha app of how to tap into it. But anyway, once you're in the app, you pick your bike, and you go over here to the maintenance part, and down here, diagnostic code. If it's empty, there's nothing wrong. You don't have any codes displaying. If there's a code there, well then that's your trouble code. However, on like the 2011 to 2017 YZ450 or the 2014 to 2018 YZ250F, that was a fuel injection system, but it didn't have a battery yet. You're going to want one of these GYTR tuners to access your codes. This will read your trouble codes for you. Matter of fact, if you own one of them Kickstart fuel injection Yamahas, I highly suggest getting your hands on one of these. I believe that's the part number for it right there. I don't think they sell them new anymore, but you can find them all over eBay, used and stuff like that. I don't even own one of the bikes anymore, but I keep this around just for that reason, to tap into trouble codes when I'm working on one of them bikes. If you have one of the kickstarting Honda fuel injection bikes, like let's say from 09 to, what was it, 2017 or 2016, you can use the HRC tuner on with your laptop and connect the HRC tuner, you know, the app and everything that you would use to tune one of them bikes. You can use that to access your trouble codes, or you can just watch the check engine light, get it blinking. But it doesn't have a battery, right? So what if the bike doesn't start up? You're kicking it, doesn't start. How are you going to get that check engine light? Well, we're going to talk about that in a second. And for the KTM variants, it's going to be the same thing. You're just going to keep an eye on that FI light, which is basically the MIL light, check engine light, all the same stuff. You're going to keep an eye on that. Again, if it has a battery, it's going to be pretty straightforward. You just bump the start button to light up the system, and it should start flashing whatever code is going on. Even though the bike didn't start up, when you bump that start button, it lights up the electrical system, and it stays on for, every bike's a little different, but they stay on for at least like 45 seconds or a minute. And while they're doing that, the check engine light will flash. But what if you have a fuel injection bike in it, but it's not electric start, so it doesn't have a battery? Well, that's where you're going to want a motorcycle battery. You can use a car battery too. It just has to be a 12-volt battery, but I just keep motorcycle batteries around the shop for that reason. Some alligator clips, safety wire, all that kind of stuff, because you're going to want to power up the system. Because if you remember in part 1 of this video, I pointed out how the moment they went to fuel injection, they went to a 12-volt system. The only difference is the electric start bikes have a battery and the kickstarting bikes do not, but they both have a voltage regulator that keeps it at about 12 to 13 volts when it's running. They run on a 12-volt system, and you can light up the system on a starting bike with the battery. In the description, I will have a link to this right here for you Kawasaki guys. So this will pretty much walk you into how to power up the system. It says replace the capacitor with a 12-volt battery. This is for the Kawasaki's, but it's the same thing for the kickstarting Suzuki's and the kickstarting KTM. Same thing to light up the system. And then they tell you, look at the check engine light. Is it on? It means you have an error, but you're still in user mode. For detail information, switch to dealer mode, and they tell you how to connect the yellow wire to ground and read the blink code. And then I'll walk you down here. If it doesn't have a check engine light on the handlebars, again, same thing. You connect the battery to the capacitor, where the capacitor would go, and then they walk you through using a check light, pretty much one of these right here. And these instructions will tell you where to connect that check light to, and that check light is going to be your check engine light. It's going to flash if you have codes. And of course it walks you through connecting the yellow wire to the frame to ground it out, and that's when, if it has codes, it'll start blinking the codes for you. And that's how you do it in the Kawasaki's. I'll have that, a link to that down in the description. But here's what them capacitors, condensers, whatever you want to call them, this is what they look like. On the Kawasaki's, they like to mount them right here on the radiator. On some of your kickstarting Hondas, they were kind of like right up here behind the frame. And on the KTM variants, you'll often find them up here between the radiators, between the tank and the frame. The tank and the radiators back up in here. So what you would do is you'd pull this off, disconnect it, pull it off, and then where that connects to the harness, you would hook up your positive and negative leads from your motorcycle battery to it, and that's going to light up the system. Now it's very important to connect it correctly. You don't want to connect the positive to the negative and the negative to the positive. You don't want to get the polarity reversed. It's not good. You'll notice this has a red wire and a black wire. The red wire is usually the positive wire, but I still like to confirm that. So what I'll do is I'll take my multimeter. What I'll do is I'll put my ohm meter here on ohms, but where it beeps when it gets a continuity, and then I'll connect to whichever one I think is the ground for the connection for the condenser on the wire harness. So let's say this black wire, I believe this is a wire harness for the bike. I just disconnected the condenser. I believe that black wire is a ground. So what I'll do is I'll probe that one right there, and I'll take this other end and I'll touch a bare metal part of the motor or the frame and see if I hear. If I do, then I know that's the ground. So I want to hook the ground to the battery to that one, and then the positive that one to light up the system. So I like to verify it before I hook it up, because at this point you do not have a fuse. Like if you have a battery electric start dirt bike and you accidentally connected the battery up backwards, it would pop the fuse. But when you're hooking up to where the condenser was at, you don't have a fuse. So you want to make sure you connect it right the first time. Do not get the polarity backwards, because you can blow your ECU, you can damage all kinds of stuff. So definitely don't do that. Definitely check before you hook it up. That's my suggestion. So alright, you pulled your trouble code. You found your trouble code. Let's pretend it's code 12. Well heck, I don't know what code 12 is. I don't even have the manual to the bike. How do I know what code 12 is? Well, it could just be as easy as a quick Google search. Just type in your model, preferably add the year to, write code 12, and you're going to find it pretty quickly. Code 12 is a crankshaft position sensor. You're going to find videos on that code. You're going to find all kinds of stuff. But if you have the manual, it makes it a lot easier. Yamaha manuals, you can download them for free. I'll have a link down in the description for that if you're interested. Right here, this is the Yamaha manual. So I'm going to hit troubleshooting here. And let's see, self-diagnostic function table, fuel injection. I'm going to click that. It's going to have every code right there. Remember code 12, crankshaft position sensor. No normal signals are received from the crankshaft position sensor. So it's just, there's no connection. It's not getting a signal from it. That's what that means. And it's going to tell you what page to go to, and it's going to give you the diagnostic chart for that. So we're going to just focus on code 12 here. It says page 817. Let's go to that. Okay, page 817 is going to have a chart, more or less, for us to look at. So you're going to start with step 1. It's going to have you check the connections, and if you find it bad, it's going to tell you the next thing you need to do and the next thing you need to do. But if that's good, then you go to step 2, and if that's good, then you go to step 3. But if it's not, you follow this and follow that, right? And then obviously you just keep following it until you figure it out. They always seem to end with faulty ECU. That's just how it goes, because if you checked everything's good, then it could be the ECU. Most of your trouble code charts will end with replacing the ECU. That's just how that goes. Now, if you want to see a real life diagnosing of a code 12, check down the description. I'll have a link to a video where I had a bike come in here that had a code 12. I diagnosed it, chased it down to the problem, and fixed it. So if you wanted to see this like in real world action, check down in the description for a link to that video. That was on a YZ 450 2025, I believe. Now, as mentioned in part 1 of this video, the ECU cannot tell you exactly what's really wrong. It can just tell you what it's seeing. So the example I gave in part 1 was your air intake temperature sensor. It knows if it's connected and it's receiving a signal from that or not, telling it how hot or cold the air is going inside the motor. It knows that. So if it's not receiving a signal from that, because let's say it's disconnected, a wire broke, or the sensor just took a dump, it's going to kick a check engine light for that, and it'll have a trouble code for that. What it doesn't know is it doesn't know if the sensor is reading accurately or not. So let's say the air temperature outside is 80 degrees, the bike's inhaling 80-degree air, but the sensor's not accurate. It's telling the ECU that it's inhaling 40-degree air. Well, it doesn't have another reference to know if that's accurate or not, so it's going to just assume it's accurate, and it's not going to kick a check engine light on that. Or vice versa, you're in 40-degree weather, but it's reading 80 degrees. The sensor's telling the computer it's 80 degrees. The computer doesn't know if it's true or not. It just knows it is receiving a signal from that, and it says it's at such and such degrees. So, you know, the computers can't always tell you exactly what's wrong. They can just only tell you what they're seeing. But it is a huge clue, and it's why it's one of the first things that I check if I feel the bike might have a sensor, or it has a running issue, right? And I can't really, it doesn't jump out at me as being something mechanical right off the rip. I'm thinking, no, there's got to be something going on here. Just check for codes. It only takes a minute to check for codes, and that might send you right down the right path. Like I said, I highly suggest checking the video in the link where I diagnosed that YZ450. You'll see how I went through that. Let's talk a little bit about the charging system, the stator, and the electrical system of the bike as far as creating the 12 volts and 13 volts. On the kickstarting bikes, if there's any issue with the stator or the voltage regulator, in most cases the bike's just not going to run, because it doesn't have the voltage it needs for the system to run. However, it's a little bit different with the electric start bikes that have a battery. It's just much like our cars. The stator can stop producing power and charging the system, but because it has a battery, that bike will run on the battery until it kills the battery. Or if the voltage regulator took a dump and it wasn't sending the proper 13 volts to charge the battery up and keep the system up and going while the bike's running, if that took a dump, it's no different than the stator going bad as far as what the bike knows, and the bike will run until the battery dies. On the kick-starting bikes, you can just tap into where the condenser is, tap into them 2 wires with your multimeter, and just start kicking, kick, and you can see if it starts building up to, you know, some voltage. You might not get all the way to 12 volts with kicks. You might only see it get up to 10 or 11 or 9, but as long as you start seeing it trying to get there. What does help is removing the spark plug so you can kick it faster and really get it spinning to check the voltage, is to make sure that, you know, do I have an electrical issue? Is that why this bike is not running? Because it's just not getting any power to anything. Another little tip on the kick-starting fuel injection bikes: if you are starting to think that the bike's not running because of a charging issue, let's say the stator's out, so it's not producing any electricity that it needs to run the CDI, produce spark and everything like that, Again, you could just use a motorcycle battery and tap it into where the condenser is, just like I showed you a minute ago, and that will light up the whole system. At that point, if the bike is a running bike, if everything's good except for the charging system, it should start up. If it still doesn't start up when you connect the battery to where the condenser would go, then it's something else causing it. It's not a bad stator or voltage regulator. On the electric start bikes, like I said, you just tap and check the battery with your voltmeter here. If it's reading 12 volts, like, okay, we know the battery's good, the bike starts and runs, but the battery dies after a little while, and then we have to charge the battery back up. Well, you can check the electrical system pretty easily just by getting the battery charged back up again, so it starts the bike. And then what I like to do is put the ohm meter or the voltmeter on the battery before I start it, and it will read, like this one's reading 13.18 volts right now, and then I'll start the bike up, and I want to see that voltage go upward, not down. It should go higher once the bike started. Now keep in mind, you have to raise your RPMs up a little bit. At idle, it's creating voltage, but not a ton. So if you just crack the throttle and just hold it there and watch that voltage, you should see it start going up, not down. If it just continues to go down, your charging system, there's something wrong with it. It's either the stator or the voltage regulator or a wiring issue, but there's something wrong with the charging system. But if you see it go upward, then you want to watch, see how high it goes up. It should go up no higher than 14, like 14.1, 14.2. Most of them hover around 13.2 to 13.8, somewhere in that range. And as long as it rises up to that after you start the bike up, then you can rest assured that your charging system's working and it's charging the battery. Alright, so now let's take a little bit of time and let's run through each individual electrical component, sensor, and whatever, anything electrical on the bike. We're going to go from one part to the next, and we're going to talk a little bit about each one. So let's start with the stator and the ignition pickup. It's usually on the left hand side of the bike behind the ignition cover there. Here's one from an old CRF 450 if I remember correctly, but you'll have three parts to this. You have the, if I can get it out of here, it is stuck. Let me get it out. Alright, so you have the flywheel, and there's some magnets in here, and the polarities of the magnets interact with the coils right here on the stator, and that's what produces your electricity. So that will go right in there. Alright, and then we have the pickup, and as I showed you in the first video, the pickup sits off to the side of the flywheel. There it is right there, and it senses these little high tabs on the stator flywheel right here, and that's what tells the computer where the crankshaft is located at and its rotation, so it knows when it's at top dead center or close to it, so it can tell the coil it's time to spark. So how do we check these? Well, like, let me get this thing back out of there. Dang it. Yeah. Okay. Well, like I mentioned in the first video, you can test to see if the stator is bad or good with the ohm meter, and you can compare it to the values in the manual. Just because it tests good doesn't mean it is good, but if it tests bad, you know it's bad. So sometimes if it tests good but you still are questioning if it's really good, you might just have to try another one, or maybe from someone else's bike, or just buy one and try and see. But it's pretty easy. You put it on the little horseshoe symbol right there. Take your multimeter. Now we have a blue and a white wire going to here, and then over here we have a blue and a green and white. So I'll come over here. We're looking for the blue and white. There it is. Pop that sucker right in there. And we can see it's reading 18.4 ohms. We would go into the repair manual and keep losing the connection here. We'd go in the repair manual and see if it's within that range, and if so, well, we know that it's at least testing good on the bench. How about the pickup here? We have the blue and the green and white wire, so that's going to be the other terminal here. Let's see. And that's measuring 247 ohms, so we'd go in the manual and see if that's within the range. If it is, then we can pretty much assume this is good. These are usually either good or bad, honestly, the pickups. It's mainly the the stator pickup that can sometimes, I'm sorry, the stator itself that can sometimes test good, but it's actually not good. And I believe what happens, because I've seen sparks and stuff like that on them before, is the insulation just goes bad in here and between the coils, and it'll test good with the ohm meter, but once it starts producing electricity, it'll start sparking between coils, and it'll just kind of cancel itself out and it won't work. All right, and then after the stator, with the fuel injection bikes, it will go to a voltage regulator. That's what it's going to send the power to from the stator on a fuel injection bike. On a non-fuel injection bike, like your carbureted bikes, they don't have a voltage regulator. The voltage just varies. Like this was from a CRF 450, so this just, both these just pretty much plug right into the CDI, and it just does its thing. But on these modern day bikes that are fuel injection, they have voltage regulators, and that's where from the stator, the power wires from the stator are going to go right to the voltage regulator, where the voltage regulator can convert it to DC and regulate it at about 13 volts. Now, in your manual, it will tell you how to test this with the ohm meter, just like we did a minute ago for the stator. You can see we can get some readings. Well, it read for a second. This one might not even be good. There we go. So, you know, the manual will tell you what it should test out at. This is just like a stator. If it tests good, it doesn't mean it's good. If it tests bad, you can be pretty certain it's bad. But if it tests, I've seen it where they test good with the ohm meter, but they just don't work right. This one actually tested fine. It was making 15 volts. It was making too much voltage. This one actually came off a quad, and the high voltage was like popping his light bulbs and stuff, his headlight bulbs. So we had to replace that and get it down to normal voltage, and it was all good. So just because they test good doesn't mean they're good, but if they test bad, they're bad. That pretty much covers the charging system. Now we'll talk about the starting system. Here we go. Alright, this is a kill switch, but I'm going to just pretend this is a start button, because they're the same thing pretty much. These are pretty easy to test out. You just probe it with your meter here. I'm going to put it on the setting right here where it shows the speaker or whatever. That shows me, watch. You hear it? It's not consistent though. This thing's probably going bad. There you go. But you can see when I press, you see there, it's showing that it's open right there. But when I press this, you'll see the ohms read and it beeps for a second. This kill switch is probably good. It's just a little dusty. Hasn't been used in a long time. But that's how you check the start button too. If you wanted to check the start button. For the starter relay. Remember how I mentioned there's two fuses, but really one fuse is just a spare. This is a spare. You'll see there's no metal contacts in here for it. So I'm going to pull that sucker out of there. Get it out of the way. And this is the real fuse. What I'm trying to figure out right here is... Alright. Okay. Got it figured out. So with the fuse in place here, you see the B right here. This is your main battery wire. It goes right to the battery. And this is for the M, is for the starter motor. So we know that's the main battery wire. And it goes right to the fuse here. And it lights up these two terminals. Watch this. I have it. Is this fuse bad? There we go. Right there and right there. So it's going to send power to these two terminals right here. But so that means these two bottom terminals right here, these two bottom ones are to activate the starter solenoid. So let's try that. So when you press your start button, that's what it's going to be sending power to. So we're going to give it a shot. Two alligator clips connected to it. You hear it when I connect to the battery. That's the starter relay. So let's test it. We're going to hook this up. Just going to set these right in here. There it is. So this starter relay is actually good. Starter solenoid, whatever you want to call it. If you don't have, if your bike has a good battery, but there's just no power anywhere, check the fuse. If that's good, check this connection. I find that these connections can get corroded up and just cause the bike to go dead. But basically all this does takes power from the battery right here to B, and it sends it to the starter when there's power to them two connections right there. From you pressing the start button, it'll complete the current from here to here, send power to the starter, and there's a positive terminal for the starter. The starter receives its ground from being bolted onto the motor itself. One of the things that I do quite often, if I hit the start button and nothing happens, I check the battery. The battery's good. Well, what's going on? Do I have a bad starter motor, or is it up in the starter button area, or is the CDI just not sending the signal to the starter relay to send power to the starter? Well, you can jump it. So that's your positive coming from the battery, and this is the wire going to the starter motor. I just use an old pair of needle nose. You can see the tips of these are being burnt off, and I just connect them together. You know, you have your wires going to it, but you just connect it together while it's on the bike. And if it turns that starter, well, that indicates to me that I either have just a bad starter relay, or starter button, or something related in between the starter button and the starter relay. But this is where the Hondas get tricky, and I'll talk about that towards the end of the video, so I can keep moving through with this. Relays, you'll run into these on some bikes. Some bikes have actual just relays. A relay is pretty much just like the starter solenoid that we just played with here a minute ago, except they're not using it as a fuse box at the same time. It is literally just a relay. So two of the connections in here, and you can look at the diagram, figure out which one it is, or if you're nifty, you can poke at it with your own meter and figure it out. So it's going to be these two on the right here. All right. If I connect the positive and negative to this, and it's going to connect these two together here, and it's going to complete a connection. And when there is no positive and negative here, then it opens it. It's just a relay. It's all it is. But they're easy to check. For the bikes that don't have a battery, the kickstarting bikes with the condenser, instead of a battery, it just has a condenser. This thing right here, it's basically just a rechargeable battery. It's a capacitor. It stores power in between kicks because these bikes don't have a battery, right? The kick-starting fuel injection bikes. Your manual will walk you through how to check it, what values to look for. Another thing you can do is just remove it and replace it with the battery as if you were checking the check engine light or the MIL to see if there's any codes. You can put a battery on it, and if that bike starts right up and runs pretty good, you know, starts right up with a couple kicks, but yet when you put this on, it's a bear to start, and it's probably one of these, because that's what it does. It stores power in between kicks. So if you're having a hard time starting, we got to kick fast to get it to start up, well, it wouldn't hurt to check that. Okay, there's all kinds of sensors all over these bikes. I'm going to start with the coolant temperature sensor right here on this one. They're basically just a variable resistor, and it varies on temperature, right? So this probe goes right into the coolant stream. The ECU is sending about 5 volts to one of the terminals here, and then it will apply a certain amount of resistance to that 5 volts to send back the remaining power to the ECU, and how much comes back is how hot or cold the bike is, right? So as it gets hotter, it will change the resistance that it's sent and the amount of power that it's sending back to the ECU. Now these are real easy to test, like anything else that we've been testing here. You just put your voltmeter on ohms, and you reach in here and touch the two terminals. Let's see here, and then you compare it to what the manual says. So that's reading 1.6, and the manual's even going to tell you at what temperature range it should read what resistance. So keep that in mind too. Every bike's a little different. Although I find that these are either good or they're bad. You're either going to connect to these two terminals and you're going to find it open, meaning you're not going to get a reading, or you're going to get a reading. I don't really find them off very often. They're just either good or bad. So if this tests good, but you're still getting a check engine light for a coolant temperature sensor, then you're going to need to check the wires that go to it and go to the ECU. Well, here's a harness here. It's a fake little harness, but yeah. So you'd find the wire. Let's say this end right here, this wire. And you would find which wire that is at the ECU and tap into it and see if you get and I would set this on beepy, there it is, and see if you got a good connection. You're also going to want to make sure if that tests good but you're still getting the code, you're going to want to strip back all the insulation and see if you don't have two wires that got pinched together or something strange like that. And as you know, if everything tests good, if this tests good, the harness tests good, everything tests good, you'll notice in the manual, in the diagnostic chart, the very last thing it'll say is replace the ECU. So it could be the ECU. All right, the next sensor I'm going to talk about here is the air box, the air intake temperature sensor. And that's usually in the air box on these Yamahas. It's up here, you know, the KTMs I pointed out in one of the earlier videos, or earlier in this video, it's down there. Wherever the air box is at, it's going to be there. I don't have one on hand to show you right now, but it looks very similar to this right here, except they usually use like a plastic. They don't have this this hex and threaded area right here. It's usually plastic, and it gets bolted down with like a Phillips screw on the air box, whatever. But it's pretty much the same type of sensor. You check it the same way, and if it tests good, then you go up the harness the same way, and if that tests good, then it's probably the ECU. Hopefully not, but it's pretty much the same thing. Tip over sensors. This is one right here. You see it says upper. These can sometimes be built into the CDI, like on the Yamahas are built into the CDI, so it's real important that you have the CDI positioned, strapped down on the bike in the position that it's supposed to be. If you have it sideways or upside down, your bike might only run for 10 seconds and shut off because of that, because the tip over sensor is built into them. But on some bikes like the KXs and the RMZs, they actually have a separate sensor. I have seen these go bad before, and the manual again will tell you how to check it with the ohm meter or whatever. Usually what I do if I start suspecting this is bad is I just try another one. I have a few of them floating around. They're cheap. You can get them on eBay, even good used ones, for less than 20 bucks. But I've seen it where they were bad, and no matter which way we placed it, upper or whatever, the bike will only run for 10 seconds and die. Or I've seen it where they wouldn't even start up until we replaced this. I almost ran right past the ignition coil. Some bikes use coil on plugs. That's what this is. I mean, the coil goes directly on top of the plug, and the manual will tell you what resistance it should read if you tap into it. Just because it tests good doesn't mean it is good. So this one, it's definitely it's testing good, at least from what I know. But does that mean it's good? Well, I've seen it where they test good, but yet for some reason they didn't produce spark, or they didn't, or the bike wouldn't run. Because what happens is sometimes this plastic in here can crack or whatever. So even though the coil that in here is still good, and that's what you're checking when you tap into it right there, but when it tries to send that spark down to the spark plug, well, it's shorting out or it's grounding out somewhere in here. So just because it tests good doesn't mean it is good. But if it tests bad, rest assured it's bad. And it's the same thing with these coils right here. Just because they test good doesn't mean they are good. But if they test bad, they're bad. And it's the same thing. You tap into it right here and you compare it with your manual. So we're getting 0.4 ohms right here. And then they'll even walk you through tapping. This is where the spark plug cap would go, but we don't have one on here right now. It will walk you through tapping in, I think right here. Sometimes it's the ground, sometimes it's right here. There you go. I don't find many ignition coils go bad. I know a lot of people replace them first thing when they have no spark, and they think it's the ignition coil, and that's the first thing they do. And I think that's a carryover from the automobile world, the car world. When we lose spark, a lot of times it is a coil, but on our dirt bikes, I don't see many coils go bad. I do see it, not many. But what I do find is a lot of times a wire can go bad and lose connection in here, and maybe if you just twist the spark plug, boot in it tighter, or pull it apart, snip it shorter, and then twist it on, you get a connection again. But otherwise, I don't see many of them go bad. Usually when bikes lose spark, in most cases, what I find is a bad stator. That's usually what I find when when a bike loses spark. But yeah, manifold absolute pressure sensor. That's where the vacuum line would connect to it right there to go to the throttle body, where it can sense the engine vacuum, and it also serves two purposes. It also lets the ECU know the atmosphere pressure as well, so it knows if you're a high altitude or low altitude. Same thing, the manual will tell you how to probe it and what resistance it should read and stuff like that. But even if it tests good, it doesn't mean it is good. But I have seen these bad. I've seen them actually read wrong, and it was It was reading like we were at a high altitude, but we were really at sea level. I put a new one on and corrected the way the bike ran. So these can go bad. It is rare. I think I've only ran into one or two in my whole life that were bad. So don't just rush in at this one. The main thing you want to do is just make sure the vacuum line's in good shape. As long as it's not kicking any codes for this, it's usually not this. Throttle position sensor. This is just some random throttle position sensor right here. But that's where the throttle blade right here, when you open and close the throttle, would spin this thing in here for the sensor. And that's going to tell the ECU how much throttle you're giving it. Now, in the description, I'll have a link to a bike where we replace the throttle position sensor on a YZ250F, and there's a lot of information in there on this if you're more curious about what each individual one of these terminals do down here and all that kind of stuff. Just to give you a heads up, a spoiler or maybe an update, that did fix that bike. We haven't had an issue with that bike since we replaced that throttle position sensor, the one in the video in the description. It did fix it for Joey. But the manual will tell you how to tap into this and check to see if it's working. Now here's what I can say about these. They can test totally fine. Even when you hook up your phone to the Yamaha, or you use the handheld tuner for the Yamaha, and you can slowly give it throttle, and you can watch the throttle position go up and then down if you let it go down. Doesn't mean it's good. I've seen it where these are everything's testing good in the shop, but yet on the track it'll only run fine for a couple minutes and act up, or there'll only be one little throttle range that it acts up. But for some reason we're not noticing it when we're checking it on the bench or with the ohm meter in the shop. So these are one of them things that you just kind of have to go with your gut feeling sometimes. Try everything else out first and give it a shot. And that's why I highly suggest checking out the video in the description, because that was one of them deals where everything was testing fine in the shop. On the bench it was good. In the shop it was good. We tried a different fuel pump to kind of exit that out. That was fine. We checked the stator. We checked everything. Everything was testing good. Last shot in the dark, I said, well, I've seen it before. Let's swap out the throttle position sensor. And it fixed it. Some of the stuff, what I'm basically saying is some of this stuff comes through experience and intuition. And you know, the more you repair these, the more you kind of you have that experience to fall back on, and that helps you out when you got to pull the trigger on something and just say, hey, let's just give it a shot. Where that really gets scary is when it's time to replace ECU, because they can be pretty expensive. Alright, fuel injectors. Well, this is a car fuel injector right here, but I brought that in here just because I don't have a dirt bike one available to show you, except for one that's maybe on that bike. I'm not going to pull it off the bike, but it's the same thing, but a little bit shorter on our bike. These have 2 terminals in them, and you can check them with the ohm meter again, and you can compare it to what the manual says that it's supposed to be at. So let's check this one right here. Boom. Oop. Getting about a 12.7. Actually, that's what that one's supposed to be at. I do know that because I've checked them recently. Anyway, again, just because it tests good with the ohm meter doesn't mean it's good, because there's a mechanical aspect to this too, right? We all know fuel injectors can become clogged. They can become sticky, especially if you let your bike sit around for a long time with fuel in it. The fuel ages and gets old. It can gum up. There's a little pencil in here. It opens and closes it, and it can gum it up and get stuck. There are ways to clean these out, back flush them, try to bring them back to life. Actually, I'll have a link in the description to that video where I walk through cleaning injectors and kind of see if you can bring it back to life. The electronic part of a fuel injector, I don't think I've ever seen one go bad, honestly. I know they can go bad, but I haven't run into it myself. What I find is it becomes wonky. It doesn't flow proper. It becomes sticky, or partially clogged or whatever. But otherwise, the electrical part of them I find typically always works on these. So now when it comes to cleaning them, if you watch the video down in the description, I do mention that, you know, 80-90% of the time I can bring them back to life with a good cleaning, but there's always that 10% of the time or whatever that you just have to replace it. Fuel pumps, well, they're pretty simple. The one in this bike's back here. You usually only have 2 wires connected to it, like this one right here is just 2 wires. and it's just one's a positive, one's a negative. You can pull it, you can disconnect it, probe the harness part of the wire here, hit the start button, make sure it's sending 12 volts to the fuel pump. If it is, you pull the whole fuel pump off the bike, put it on the bench, connect the battery to it, and use a fuel pressure gauge like this, and you can check the fuel pressure. Down in the, I have probably about 5 videos on fuel pumps where I've done them on different bikes, but I'll pick one of the videos and put a link down in the description where I walk through diagnosing and repairing that fuel pump if you're interested in that. If you want to see more, just check my channel. I have a ton of fuel pump videos. Gear position sensor right here. These sensors, I've never seen one make a bike not run. I've never seen one make a bike run bad. So, you know, they tell the computer what gear you're in for the most part. Every model is a little different at what actual gears it tells it that it's in. Some will let it know each individual gear, but most of them only let it know if you're in first gear, neutral, or second gear. And then third, fourth, and fifth, when it receives no signal from this, then the computer assumes, okay, I'm in third, fourth, or fifth. And I believe the reason they do that is so that it wants to know if it's in first or second gear, because they're going to provide a different map in first or second gear. It's usually a softer map from some of the other bikes I've seen. I don't know specifically for this one, but some of the other bikes I've seen that use these, it's usually a softer map in first and second gear, because they know you're already at a really low mechanical advantage being in such a low gear, and it's to kind of soften the power there to help you with traction and stuff like that. Then once you're in third, fourth, and fifth, they want to give you all the beans. And then they want to know if you're a neutral or not for a couple reasons. And I don't know all the reasons, but I do believe some of them are for noise, that allow the bike to rev out quieter to help you pass sound tests. But also for these newer Yamahas, you'll notice that when you're in neutral and the bike's idle nice and steady, pull on the clutch, put it in gear, you'll notice the idle raises up a little bit. They run a higher idle once you're in gear, so they need to know if you're in neutral so they can run that lower idle, more steady, just a nice low idle to help the motor stay cooler, to idle longer, cooler. But when you're in gear, they want a higher idle because less chance of stalling when you're in the air or doing something stupid like that if you have a higher idle. And these are super easy to test with your ohm meter. You just follow the wire where it connects, disconnect it, follow what the manual says, and you just cycle through its gears and check the wires, when it beeps, when it doesn't. It's super easy to test. Well, I think that's pretty much a wrap on this crash course into the ECU electrical components of these dirt bikes. This was kind of a tough video to put together because I'm trying to like take all the bikes and put it into one package, and they're all a little bit different, but they all have a lot in common. And once you understand how to work on one bike, let's say you learn how to work on a KTM, it won't take you very long to figure out a Yamaha, because they all have about the same sensors, and they all kind of use the same stuff. It's just you're going to find them in different locations, and they might wire things up a little bit differently. Oh, can't forget that Honda. That stubborn Honda since 2017 on the electric start. First off, I have 3 videos on the CRF 450 starting issues, and oh man, I don't even know where to start with these. I don't want to make this video too long talking about that. I'm just going to get right to it. Right? They have a safety programmed. They have the safety feature programmed into the ECU. So what happens on these newer Hondas with the electric start is when you hit that start button, which this battery's disconnected, so it's not going to do anything. But when you hit that start button, right away it sends power first to the starter relay to send power to the starter. But at the same time, it's paying attention to the ignition pickup down here in the stator area. If it does not sense that motor moving the minute you hit that start button, the ECU will pull out of the starter relay and pull out of the power on the starter motor. So what you'll get, if that's not spinning when you hit the start button for whatever reason, bad starter clutch, bad starter motor, a locked up motor, whatever the case, all you're going to get is a super fast kick. That's all you're going to hear. Kick of the starter relay turn on and shutting off instantly. Kick. And people are like, well, what is it? It's hard to test a bike when it happens so quick, right? So you can't, usually like on a normal bike, if it's the starter clutch, you'll hit it and you'll hear the starter motor spin, but you won't get the typical boop, 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 cranking sound. You get just a zzz, zzz, and that's the starter clutch. The starter motor's spinning, but it's not actually spinning the motor over, so I'm not getting the cranking sound. I'm just hearing the zzz, it's a starter clutch. But on the Hondas, if it doesn't turn that motor over, it's a split second. All you get is, if it's a bad starter clutch, all you get is, kick. So like, well, heck, I don't know what it is. Is it the starter clutch? Is it the starter motor? Is the motor locked up? Is it the starter reduction gear? They have something in these electric start bikes called the starter reduction gear. All it is a gear that after a certain amount of torque, it will slip by, and that's so in case the motor does get locked up and the motor keeps spinning, the starter motor wants to try to spin it over, after a certain amount of torque, it will slip it by to help save you from damaging other things down the line. But them starter reduction gears fail in the Hondas all the time. They become freewheeling, and they will act like they have a bad starter clutch. Anyway, long story short, the Hondas can be really difficult if you hit the starter button and it goes tick, and that's all you get out of it. I have 3 videos on it. Matter of fact, I'll put 3 links in the description to all 3 of them videos, because like I often tell a lot of people when they're trying to figure out the system, they're only about 20-minute videos each. If you watch all 3 of them, you'll understand that system pretty well. Usually what I do, is they have a cover on this side that you can get to the crank, and I try spinning the motor by hand with the crank. And if it's all good there, then I know the motor's not locked up. If the motor's not locked up, then I'll jump the starter solenoid like I showed you on the bench a minute ago by connecting these 2 wires together. And I already know the motor's not locked up, so I'm not going to break anything. And then I can hear what it's doing. If I hear it go bzzz, I know, okay, we got a bad starter reduction gear or a bad starter clutch. We're going to have to pull off that clutch cover and figure out which one it is. It could be tough, but I'm only mentioning that to let you know that if you hit that button, it goes kick, before you just assume that it's a starter relay or it's a bad starter motor or whatever. You're going to have to dig in, unless you want to just buy a bunch of parts. You're going to have to dig in and figure out which one it is. I have 3 videos covering all that kind of stuff, and that should help you get through that. Alright, so yeah, it's pretty much a wrap for this quick crash course on these electrical systems. Time to get my bike cleaned up. Rode 74 yesterday. Took out the YZ250 2-stroke. I went to stiffer springs on it. Went to 5.5 in the rear, 0.48s up front. Did not like it. I could not get that bike tuned in with that spring set to something that I was comfortable with. I just never felt comfortable with the bike all day long. So now I got to put my 5.3 back in it and the 0.47 fork springs back in it. Dang it, all that work for nothing. But it is what it is. Then later this week, I'll be putting a Wiseco forged clutch basket in my YZ125. It's kind of due. I think I'm starting to get some notches in the clutch basket, and I'm feeling a little bit of slippage up in the higher gear, so time to upgrade to a better clutch basket. I'm actually going to do a little video review on that. I'm going to do a video putting that in the bike and a review. The review part's not much, and we all know what clutches do, clutch baskets do, but I figured it'd be fun to take the bike to the track. And the main meat of the video is how to put one of them in, though, and I'm going to have that out this week. Not sure what I'll be riding next weekend, although I believe I'll be taking the YZ125 out to get the review for that clutch basket, check it out. Plus, take a break from this. I busted my ass at 74 yesterday trying to get that suspension right with the stiffer springs, and I just need a break. I just want to go ride at this point. I don't want to do any more tuning. I just want to go ride. I'm going to put my old springs back in with the old settings. At least it was good and rideable. I was chasing that pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, and it just wasn't there. I always think there's something better in the bag, and I guess you don't know until you try, right? So I'm going to have to go back to what I had for the time being. There she is, the YZ125 2021. I'll be taking that out next week. Tell you what, when you want to just have fun, nothing beats a 125. Plus, they're simple. We've just talked about all these electronics that these bikes have and everything. Nothing like getting on a simple 2-stroke. I do enjoy the simplicity of them, especially after working on them all week long, highly complicated bikes. It's nice to get on something simple and just go have a good time. So that's a wrap. Hope you guys have a wonderful Easter. Happy Easter, everybody. Yes, Jesus is alive. Catch you in the next video.